Welcome. And welcome to Greetings from Beyond Radio, ladies and gentlemen. Before I go any further, um, it came to my attention 2 days ago that a dear friend of mine and fellow colleague, Paul Eno, passed away. It's an unfortunate thing, but Paul, as you can see here, worked with Ed and Lorraine Warren. This was back in the 70s. He's the handsome chap off to the right of Lorraine and Ed. And they already presented his obituary. So this show is dedicated to Mr. Paul Eno, right there, in loving memory. And may he rest in peace. And my prayers go to his family, his two sons, his wife, and grandchildren. May he rest in peace. So I'm going to before we go any further and I introduce our guest, I'm going to go ahead and want to play a trailer to what I thought was a good shock doc, The Curse of Robert the Doll. So, watch this.
His name is Robert the Doll, and he's considered the most haunted doll in the world.
Oh, Robert, here we are again.
The story of Robert the Doll begins in 1905.
Robert the Doll has haunted Key West for more than 100 years. You go down the list, anything bad that's happened has been blamed on Robert. Fires, floods, illness. It doesn't end.
I just heard, I curse people who don't believe. People that come in and say, this is just a joke, this is all fake, they're the ones who get hit the hardest. I never really believed in curses, but I do now. 100% I do now. I could feel something was there to hurt me. There's definitely a very angry, aggressive, and violent spirit attached to Robert the Doll.
It was the scariest moment that I have ever had in my life.
We have all put our fears and our energy into this thing. We have created Robert the Doll. We make monsters, and then we can't control them when they get out into the world.
Things that you see on TV about other dolls, they're not real. Robert is real.
His name.
And that, my friends, is the trailer I was referring to, The Curse of Robert the Doll. And as you could see, or you'll see very soon, someone that you'll recognize that was in that shock doc. Good friend of mine, colleague, someone that I've known for well over a decade now, and someone that I have a great deal of respect for, Mr. David L. Sloan. Welcome to the show, David.
Great to be on with you again.
It's great to see you and talk with you. It's been a decade. We were talking backstage about that, and I was like, wow, it's been that long. Time does fly. And before you know it, we're our age.
Right?
I know, right?
Robert the Doll has anything to do with that.
Something that I also pointed out in the flyer, you are an author, and you own Phantom Press. How many books have you written other than Robert the Doll from that one particular?
I've probably done about 25, 30 books in Key West.
Wow.
About 14 or 15 of them sell well to this day. Other ones have, there's a whole variety, but mostly I focus on Key West. And we cover everything from books about the history of key lime pie and cookbooks, The Haunted Key West, Ghosts of Key West. There's a really great one about Count von Kassel, who's the guy who dug up the woman he was in love with after she died. and lived with her for 7 years. So I was able to publish his original diary and do the introduction for that one.
What a sad story. Very morbid too.
Mm-hmm.
And I do remember that. I had a friend that had the news clipping because he lived in Key West, and he had the news clipping of it. That's how old he was. And he had the news clipping of the actual woman. And I was like, oh my God, that was horrific, but also very tragic. I don't want to call it a love story because
it's been painted as a love story through the years, but the information that I've uncovered makes it pretty clear that that he was a predator and a murderer. And I believe that she may be buried in his grave.
Oh, that's a story for another time when I have you back on, because honestly, we're here tonight to not only discuss Robert the Doll, but of course, a little tidbit of trivia that people don't know about my friend here, Dave, is in the Guinness Book of World Records for, call it out,
the world's largest key lime pie and the world's smallest key lime pie.
And you know what? If anyone knows anything about Key West other than Robert the Doll and David Sloan and all the other, hauntings and urban legends, Hemingway, is key lime pie originated in Key West, from what I understand.
Correct.
And there's a festival about this every year. And of course, leave it to Dave. He's just got to throw his pie in there and say, I got the smallest one and I got the biggest one. And he got it. Good on him. Real quick, before we go any further, I'm going to give a shout out to Jenny Davis, Beth Allen. Thank you for joining us in the chat. If you guys have any questions whatsoever, I agree 100%. I'm not going to disagree with you, because Dave is one of those that is chock full of information, and I guarantee you there's a lot we're going to be missing. Jenny Davis, I loved talk to David at Michigan, and here he's and heard his lecture. My Paracon. Yeah. Jenny is one of those that goes to just about every paranormal convention in the United States and all of North America. And she had the pleasure of talking to you. And let me tell you, it is a pleasure and an honor. Dave, how do we, and we kind of touched on this, and you and I agreed. I don't think Robert the Doll would be considered an urban legend, because this goes beyond 100 years now. What would we call this?
Well, I think it's real interesting. I always, a lot of people call him the most haunted doll in the world, which I think is fair. What I like to call him one of Key West's greatest mysteries. And the fascinating thing is he's been around since 1904. So the legend about him, it grew to this point where everybody was talking about the doll, and there was no denying the crazy things that were happening with it. But then we were able to take all of these legends, and I was able to reverse engineer them and tie them into the true history of the Otto family. And we were able to figure out, whoa, this stuff actually makes sense. And we were able to figure out where these legends started and why they're happening. And that's what I think is fascinating about Robert the Doll. The history proves the mystery, and it's a story that continues to evolve because there's such great public access to the doll. Hundreds of people go to see him every day. And now you have more than 10,000 people who have written letters to a doll. And many of those letters are saying, hey, Robert, please remove the curse. I'm sorry I didn't believe it. So what we really have, it's a phenomena unlike anybody's ever seen. He's the original haunted doll, and he's affected more people's lives.
I've read some of those letters. In fact, the last time I was in Key West at the East Martello Museum, there was boards full of these letters. Some were open, some were still in the envelope. and I was reading the stories of, and I know exactly what you're talking about. I didn't realize how many. How many were they again?
Over 10,000 now.
10,000 now. That was 10. Wow. Okay, that was 10 years ago when I saw it, and it was like a few boards full. So now you're saying into the thousands.
They
That
ran
is-
out of room on the wall, and they
Oh
have
my
a video
gosh.
screen where they show a lot of the letters. And we operate the tours up there at night. We work, Robert's owned by the nonprofit Key West Art and Historical Society. And we collaborate with them to bring the haunted history there and operate the paranormal experiences. And we'll see every letter that comes in. And I'll come in there at night. Some nights he's got just one or two. Other nights there are 4 or 5. And they really cover the range. And some of them, they leave a mark with you.
I agree. My dear friend here, Beth Allen, said that is not a doll to play with. Well, you know what? I think I would agree, and so would Dave, because I don't play. I remember when I first took pictures of Robert the doll, and this was back in 2004. I not only asked permission several times. Of course, I'm here expecting, a response, but you're really not going to get one. But out of respect, I said, please allow me to take some pictures of you. And I asked several times, and I made sure. And every picture I took, I'd always say before taking the pic, I'm asking permission again. Thank you, Robert. I appreciate it. Nothing happened. Nothing. Okay. Now, I don't know. Is this something psychosomatic, something that has been dug into our psyche, that it's a fight or flight type situation, would you say? I'm just being devil's advocate here.
I think there's definitely that element of it.
Okay.
Now, so people have been reporting things with Robert the doll long before that. And it's interesting. You mentioned 2 really key points. One was asking permission, and they have a sign on the wall saying, don't forget to ask Robert's permission.
You're right.
I think something you'll agree with me on, because I like the way you phrased it. You didn't say, Robert, can I take your picture? You said, you said it in a less direct way, because when we ask permission of an entity, we're almost giving them power above us.
Correct.
And elevating them. And there's so many spirits involved with Robert, and they're not all good. So I always caution people. I say, listen, don't ask permission, just be respectful. And respect is the other key thing that you mentioned. You said you approached with great respect.
Oh, yeah.
And that's what I tell people to do. But so with asking permission, there's different schools of thought. And of course, that's an incredible thing. When they did the shock doc, they didn't want to hear that you shouldn't ask permission. They said, give us the rules and make sure you say, ask permission. So there are 2 schools of thought on that. But that was something, I've been researching Robert since before he was on display. So it's easy to pinpoint when that came about, and and more or less who started that. It's not to say that they were wrong. That might have been their belief, but it wasn't people who were involved in the paranormal.
Gotcha. So would you say that, well, you said that there were already experiences with Robert the doll long before all of this asking permission stuff. What exactly are we talking about here? Was this Chucky the doll incarnate?
For people not familiar with the story, it goes back to 1904 in Key West, when a little boy named Robert Eugene Otto was given a gift of a doll. And the doll, he's the size of a small child. So it's not just a tiny little doll. It's like the size of a young boy.
It's pretty big, yeah.
And so he gets the doll and became very attached to the doll. Gave it his own name, Robert, and then he'd start blaming the doll for anything that went wrong. Things being broken. They say he used to push his nanny into the closet and hold the door shut. And when confronted with it, he'd say, I didn't do it. Robert did it. And then this goes on. People don't talk a lot about the time that he went away. He went to Paris and studied to become an artist. And he was married. He was gone from the house for about 25 years. And
Wow.
the doll was locked up in the attic. And he returned as a grown adult. And all these strange things start taking place again. And they say that his wife hated the doll. They say that he'd lock her in the closet. And when confronted with the abuse, he'd say, "I didn't do it, Robert did it." So you have stories going on. This is from 1904 up until the mid 40s. And then in the 1950s, kids would be going by the house and they'd see the doll up in the window moving on its own.
Mm.
And we have technicians who worked in the house. And I've talked to some of these technicians, and they talked about being in there and seeing the doll move on its own. And then when you go on, the Gene Otto became ill in the 70s. Well, before that, he had Parkinson's, spent his last 10 years up in the turret room of the house. A lot of stories taking place then, but when he died and other people started getting in the house, the stories just went crazy.
You know, and I'm laughing. I didn't mean to. I wasn't laughing at you. I'm reading it. What's being said in the chat as you're talking about this. Beth says, "Hell no, I would have put his little ass in the closet." Good luck on that one, Beth. And Leanna Skew, truth. But you know what? I've always been fascinated by Robert the doll. Just the mystique that he's created around the story, the history leading to present day, and it's still ongoing. It's just not anything that you can just snuff at. And you're right. There's been many dolls out there that have claimed to be haunted and whatnot. By far, I'd have to say Robert the doll beats them all. It's been over 100 years. I mean, we're talking 124 years now. So,
yeah, 1904. Yeah.
Yeah. So
almost 120. Yeah.
120. So we're looking at a doll that overrides, no offense to the Warrens, and may they rest in peace, Annabelle and all the other infamous haunted dolls. But would you say that this is a doll that's haunted or possessed or a little bit of both? What's going on?
Well, it's fascinating because when I was researching things, the oldest legend was always that the doll was given as a gift to the little boy by a nanny who was mistreated by the family. Now, I was able to find the nanny associated with the family, and her name was Emmeline Abbott. And she was a servant to the Ottos. She was a nanny to the little boy. And by all accounts that I could find in their family history, they were very close. And we know that she didn't give him the doll because the doll was made by this Steiff company in Germany. But I found where she lost a daughter. And what I believe happened, the boy's father was a doctor. And when he didn't save her daughter, we believe that she wanted that family to feel the pain that she did. So she sought out a voodoo practitioner. And this is interesting because we knew there were multiple entities, but didn't quite understand how many. And when they were filming the shock doc, they flew Cindy Kaza in. And it was interesting because she knew nothing about the house. We went in blind and she picked up on so much. Most of it never even appeared in the shock doc. But there's probably a couple of hours of the things that she was picking up on that were absolutely incredible. And the one thing that she realized is there's a portal inside of Robert the doll. And that she says it's a portal that's not going to close. So you've got the little child spirit, who's the main spirit. But then you have all these other not so good spirits who are almost like protectors of the child. And what we realize is when people come in and disrespect the doll, they're really disrespecting the child. And it's almost like the child will touch them and leave a sticky mark on them. And then these other entities come out and follow them home and create the misery. And the only way to remove that curse is to apologize.
We have a question from the chat room. Why did Robert Otto want everyone to be called Gene? Why blame a doll on his bad behavior?
He didn't want everybody to be called Gene. He just wanted his own name to be Gene. That was his middle name. He was Robert Eugene Otto. So he went by Gene as a kid, and he had given his first name to the doll.
I see. Do you feel that could have been a pact?
He died 1974, so there's not a lot of ways to really know. I've never spoken to him directly. The closest I've come is I spoke to their neighbor across the street, who was good friends with both of them. So that's where I've gotten most of my insight as to what Jean and Anne were like. And then there's probably 500 letters that we found in the archives at the library.
Wow.
Written between Otto family members from the time when they were in France all the way up until later in life after Jean died.
Amazing.
And that is what helped us really piece things together. And that gave me good knowledge. Reading reading letters that many parts of them were dull to get to that one good tidbit that really filled you in on something. And through that, you do get a sense, but without actually knowing them, it's hard to say on certain things.
It's not a question, it's a statement, but from Wendy Stubner Lesher. I hope I said your name right. I hope I didn't massacre it. She met Robert last year when visiting the East Martello Museum. We introduced ourselves. We were courteous and respectful. His room designated to him is really cool. The museum is fascinating. About one of David's books there. So there you go.
Yeah.
Hopefully
thanks for visiting it. It's an incredible museum. It's an old Civil War fort built in 1862. Never saw active battle, but it was used as a quarantine for yellow fever. They used it as a hospital. So you had a lot of death there through the years. And the museum has artifacts of Key West history. And a lot of those have attachments to them as well. But yeah, it's Robert's not the only thing to see there.
Yeah, I could testify to that in a court of law, being locked up in there overnight with Robert the doll and all the other artifacts there. Man, the amount of shadow figures have you ever seen shadow figures in there? I'm sure you've stayed there long enough.
Yeah.
Your peripheral is literally littered by shadow figures left and right in that museum. And it's like you said, it's a fort. And I was like, good God, what was that? I'd turn my head. It was gone. But you saw something.
And with you getting locked in there, I mean, what I found is on your first night there, a lot of times the different spirits want to not necessarily challenge you, but they want to initiate you. And that's something on the first night that a lot of people encounter.
Was I being hazed?
To a degree. I think they like to play around with you. We do. We have it where after the guided tour, people can do their own investigations. So most of the people leave and there'll just be a few of them. We turn off all the lights and give them spirit boxes. There's just some fascinating stuff. It's one of the more active places that I've been.
For those of you who are not familiar with Florida, Florida's just not Miami Beach, South Beach. It's not just Disney World. You can't forget the Keys. I mean, yeah. Key West. I mean, in Spanish, it's called Cayo Hueso. In Spanish, and I'm translating over to English, Key of Bones. Because when we first arrived, well, Americans first arrived there, they arrived to keys that were littered with bones on the very shores of these keys. And they were the indigenous Indians that had been killed off by the Spaniards, if I'm not mistaken on my history. You can correct me if I'm wrong, Dave, feel free.
There's different theories on, they're definitely native bones. Some of them were in mounds, so some of them were in trees. And there's theories that this was a sacred burial site. There's theories that warring tribes, one killed the other, and they kept going further and further down. Could have been Spaniards coming through. Mm-hmm. Somebody suggested, and this is a theory I really like. Somebody said could have been a hurricane. They could have been down there, and the hurricane comes through, washes all the bodies out, and then turns around and washes them all back in. That would explain them being in trees and spread across the beach.
Yeah, my producer loves hurricanes. She actually, I'm kidding. She really hates them because actually her first experience in Florida, and she's driving through to Tampa, and she's asked to get gas in the car by the person that was driving, and she almost swung out with the door. Yeah, there she is. No, she don't. And let me tell you, that was, I think, 2016, if I'm not mistaken, for PKC, Paranormal Kicks Cancer. And she's terrified of hurricanes. I never heard that theory, though, Dave. I'm actually happy you, yeah, I'm right. I'm happy you brought that up. I never thought about that. But yeah, it could have been, because we started documenting hurricanes really at the turn of the century, if I'm not mistaken. So to that's one theory I never thought of. And the others I had heard, warring Indian tribes, Native American tribes, and also the Spaniards killing them off. Who knows? But can you imagine, you're on a ship and you're looking for land, and you finally find a piece of land to, get onto, and you got to walk over bones. Okay. That's so Key West is full of spirits. Okay. Indigenous and otherwise, even pirates have been known to dock there. What is the most infamous Key West? Wait, hold on. Key West has a lot of crazy history. Agreed. I mean, I don't think there's anyone here that wouldn't disagree here. What is the one experience you had with Robert the Doll that made you go, okay, I need a break?
No. When I was working on the book about Robert, I hit a certain point, and when there was something that I'd start writing about, and things would happen. And it started with the flickering lights and, just the minor things that everybody talks about with ghosts. But I started losing hard drives whenever I tried to write this portion of the book. So I lost everything that I'd written on the book. And,
Wow.
it was gone. It was gone from my computer, hard drive fried, new computer. I got it set up where everything was being backed up to the keystroke. And I lost things for the fourth time. And I got the terabyte drive sent to me with everything. None of the Robert stuff was on there.
Wow.
And I went through a period. It was dark. Weird things started happening with electricity. Like strong voltage of electricity coming out of my hands when I touch things. Something started attacking me. And at first it felt, I describe it as like a gray pizza dough. Imagine somebody putting a pizza dough on your head, and it started sinking in, and it started taking over my thoughts.
Isn't that around the time I met you?
I imagine you've experienced this with all of the research you've done and all the cases that you've worked on.
Yeah.
But, and I started having dual thoughts, and at first I could tell which ones were mine and which ones weren't. And then it got to the point where I couldn't. And a series of, things were bad. I started sleeping behind the church. Didn't help. I was still getting attacked there. Everything culminated with me getting yanked out of bed. And when it happened, so I was yanked up, and I screamed, and my wife, she woke up, and she had one of those sleep masks on. So she says, "What's wrong?" And I'm reaching below me, and I couldn't feel anything. So I told her, I said, "I'm falling out of bed." And she said, "Well, get back in." And I said, "I can't. I'm still falling." And to me, that seemed so strange that there'd still be nothing below me. And then I looked over, and I was just a few feet from the ceiling. I saw the ceiling fan off to my right.
Wow.
And that's when I really, that fear sets in, and you're freaked out, and you can't talk. And I'm familiar with the things that can make you feel like this, the sleep paralysis, old hag. And when I finally was able to say, "Oh, God, help me," I dropped, and I wasn't even over my bed. I was several feet to the left of it, and I hit hard.
Wow.
I hit really, really, really hard. And I grabbed my computer, and I went onto Facebook, and I said, "I'm dealing with an entity I can't handle. I desperately need help. If you can't help me, do not comment." And that's when somebody put me in touch with Santeria priest in Key West. And he was able to come over. And when he walked around, he said, David, I'm not picking up anything here. And when he got into the bedroom, he says, oh my God, there it is. I can't deal with this on my own. And he ended up bringing several members of his Santeria family from Miami down. And they did a Misa spiritual, and they were able to remove these spirits that were attacking me. And after that, everything went on hold. I stopped writing the book. I stopped doing tours. I had to separate myself from the paranormal for a while. And I had to convince myself that none of it existed. That, that it was all in my head. There's no such thing. And at that time, I still can explain all these things that had happened to me. But for my own sanity, that's what I had to do.
There does come a point where it's fight or flight. And that's where you were.
Yeah.
And your way of fighting and coping with this and what was going on was, I didn't see that. I didn't feel that. I didn't experience that, which I believe theoretically you may have actually shut down whatever connection you had with the spirit. I'm not going to say spirits. I'll say spirit.
Mm-hmm.
And if I'm not mistaken, there's one spirit that's associated with Robert the Doll. That's a mean one. Correct?
Yeah. So the main spirit, the one that I tried to nurture now, is the child spirit. And behind that, there's actually two. And people report seeing them. They've been picked up with the different detection equipment, and they're about 8 feet tall. And they lurk around Robert's case. People have picked up images of them with their cameras. Those are the main ones. And it seems, though, that once they're preoccupied, if they latch onto someone and go with them, there's an unending supply of spirits waiting to come out of that portal and fill in to say, hey, I'm Robert the Doll now. Mm. And I think that explains why there can be hundreds of people talking about a curse from Robert at the same time.
Because it keeps churning out new ones.
There's always ones. And it's so one person can disrespect the child spirit, and then it's like a different negative entity is assigned to take care of them. And they'll stick with them until they give in.
So these other two that we're talking of are designated bodyguards of the child entity.
That's what it seems.
But it seems like when one disrespects Robert the Doll, another one pops into place from that portal you speak of to take over and guard the spirit child.
Yeah.
That's a fascinating theory. I've never heard of that one. It's new to me because I've heard all the others that we've talked about before, other than the hurricane and what happened and how Key West became to be Cayo Hueso. But I find that fascinating because then that means the doll is the portal more than anything else. Whatever I heard once that there was a stone that was put into the chest cavity of the doll by the nanny, and that's where the spirit, that protective portal and spirit, what came from. Was there any truth behind that, or was that just an urban legend? That was
a theory.
That was a theory
for some time. There's no evidence of it, but the doll's never been put through an imaging machine. But we did an examination of the doll. Once we found out that it was a Steiff doll, very rare Steiff doll, but it was easy enough to look at it. There's no clear signs where somebody would have inserted a stone like that. But it does make sense that she would have sought out a voodoo practitioner here if she was seeking revenge. Santeria was big here. There were different types. When you're going back to the early 1900s up through the 1920s, there were a lot of people practicing different types of voodoo on the island.
Well, voodoo, Santeria, hoodoo. And there's, when you go into the Caribbean, you have a plethora of different belief systems and people that give a lot of energy. And I've always said that it's in the intent. I don't care what faith you're a part of, but that has everything to do with intent. Beth says people don't understand, if you play stupid games, you win stupid prizes. You know what? She's right. I've always respected, and this, I've always been respectful. I've never gone into any investigation, be it as a paranormal investigator, researcher, or a demonologist, disrespecting in any way, shape, or form, because you don't know what's behind that corner. You don't know what's lurking in the darkness. And if you go in with a lot of how the mentality nowadays that these paranormal teams have, which is, I'm hoping that we're beginning to go downward from that trend of provocation. Have you ever witnessed an investigation around Robert the Doll or any other place in Key West that you were involved in where someone all of a sudden that you didn't know from a team started provoking?
Yes. So normally when people are doing that, they don't do it around me so much, but we'll have different people with different YouTube channels who come down and they'll do that. But we usually lay out the rules beforehand, because it is a place to be respected. The fort's sacred ground. There were the Native Americans. The fort is built on top of a burial ground. And then you have the soldiers who were there and the soldiers who died there. So we always preach respect. But people do get that's what makes this so special, is people can get one-on-one time with Robert the Doll with nobody around. And the video system in there isn't monitored all the time. I mean, it's recorded, but there's not somebody watching it the whole time. So people can get in there and they can do things that they want.
I would not mind being one-on-one with Robert the Doll. In fact, lock me up in East Martello Museum by myself. Maybe I'll bring Jen with me and a few of my friends here in the chat. Who knows? Because I know I can trust some that I'm speaking to here and are watching. That will be respectful. But I've always said, hey, don't just preach it, practice it. And I practice it as well. And everybody and anybody that has known me for years, you've known me for well over a decade now. I go in respecting, and that's the way it should be. Unfortunately, there's too many yahoos out there that seem to think they need to get a response, and they'll do anything and everything to get that response.
Right. And I think the lines have been blurred, because it used to be paranormal investigators, then it became paranormal entertainment. And there's definitely a difference between the two. And there's a market for both. I mean, there's people who enjoy paranormal entertainment. And I think some of these more extreme things, they're clearly paranormal entertainment. And I think a lot of people are smart enough to differentiate what's what. But where I think it gets interesting is people who don't understand paranormal, who are taking those risks and think they're doing something for entertainment, but they're opening up a whole ball of wax.
Oh, yeah, definitely. I agree.
Jen Richardson was saying, do you think they're acting as his protectors, or could this be something darker, using it to get to people? I actually feel like it's a combination, because I think people disrespecting the doll really is what brings them out. And I do think they go to defend. But I don't feel like they're good-natured by any means.
It doesn't seem like they are. At least, if they're in guardian mode and they're protecting a child,
mm-hmm.
they're I'm sorry, but I'm not sorry. I have 3 children. If anyone attempts to disrespect any of my children or hurt, Papa Bear comes out. That's just who I am and always will be. So I know that I relate to every person here that's been a mother. They know where I'm coming from when it comes to that. The East Martello Museum, the history behind that, is that Spaniard or is that Civil War? What exactly are we talking about here?
Well, the Martello design came from Corsica, but it was just adopted for American forts during the Civil War. And Key West had Fort Zachary Taylor, which was the big fort. And they were already building it because, protecting the Gulf of Mexico was huge. I mean, a huge strategic point for the United States. So that fort was already being built. And they had a plan for, I think, 13 or 14 Martello forts up the coast.
Wow.
But then because of, just because of the cost of materials and things like that, it was cut down to 2 that they put in Key West during the Civil War. And the fear was, it was part of the Union during the Civil War. Southernmost city in the United States, but it was never in Confederate hands because as things were heating up, there was a small troop of the United States Army, and they were kind of looking around. They're like, I think we better take over the fort. And in the middle of the night, when all the conks, that's what we call the locals in Key West, or the natives, that they were all asleep, and this small troop marched over to Fort Zachary Taylor, which was still under construction, raised the drawbridge, raised the American flag. And the next morning, Key West woke up to find out that they were part of the Union. Not everybody in town was happy about it. Some of them were okay. It seems like there were more Confederate leanings, but it created this really strange dynamic because more than 300 Confederate ships running the blockade were captured during the Civil War.
Oh,
Civil
wow.
War probably ended sooner because of the actions in Key West. But the fear
Look at that.
The fear was that the Confederates would try to take Key West back with a land invasion, like landing somewhere else on the island and attacking the fort from behind. So they built these auxiliary forts, and the Fort East Martello was one of those 2 that helped protect the island.
Something very interesting that Courtney Peterson brought up, and I want to share that with you. So I wonder, since there is history, it can more than Robert if they feel disrespect, attack, and Robert is getting all the blame. She's talking about those other 2 entities.
Right.
Do you feel that that's what's going on? Because I feel like that's why are you blaming a kid? It's really the other 2 that are protecting the kid.
Yeah, you'd think that could be an option. The one thing that makes me wonder is when the doll was at the artist house, there was a lot of stuff happening there. That's the Otto home. It's a bed and breakfast now called the Artist House, where people can actually stay in the rooms where Robert did.
Oh, hell no.
When Robert was there was activity. When Robert was locked up at the museum and not on display, there was not as much activity around him. The activity is still centered at the house where people put their focus on him.
Really?
And the turret room where he used to be with Gene Otto, that room is where most of the activity was centered. And then when Robert came out on display at the museum, there was this transfer of energy, and all of those things that were happening at the Otto home started happening at the museum. And then with more people coming through, that intensified. And then the house took on the more feminine presence of Anne Otto, and who was the wife, Minnie Otto, who was the mother, and then a little girl. People talked about seeing a little black girl sitting on the steps, crying. You think this is the child who died, Emmeline's child, who I think is the true spirit in Robert. So
really, so do you feel it was the daughter of his nanny that passed away?
Yeah. What I found is in the 1900 census, she had no children. 1910 census, no children living, 1 child dead. So in that 10-year period that Robert the Doll arrived, this nanny lost a child. And she would have taken it to the doctor that she worked for. So it's another one of those things where all the puzzle pieces fit. And then there was a legal notice in 1924 where she filed a lawsuit against the Otto family. So she was very clearly the angry nanny.
Jenny Davis saying, game on. I would love to stay in the house.
Yeah.
Also, Miss Courtney Peterson. Also, if the Indian spirits feel disrespected, maybe it can be them. Don't mess with around or with Indians as well. Well, I to that I will say this, and then chime in, please. I really feel Key West is one of the most haunted cities, right? it is a city. It's an island. You have the perfect hodgepodge of anything. And we always talk about, oh, there's an Indian burial ground. Maybe that's what's going on here. Well, guess what? You have a whole island that was surrounded by bones, and that's what's going on there. Then on top of everything else, they build a fort, okay, to protect, although it never was in battle, but it was there to protect the Gulf Coast, as you stated. And then all these other locations. I myself went to, and I'm trying to remember the name of the author, and now it escapes me. Hemingway House. I didn't feel anything. What I did feel was where he used to write. It was in a building apart from the house, and you had to go up the stairs to get to it, and that's where he would type away. And they said you can still hear the typing of his typewriter and stuff like that. I did feel something there that was up there looking down. The pool was amazing. The gazillion cats, I lost count after like 20. They're all Hemingway cats because they have, what is it? 6 paws, right? And yeah, I mean, you have the Hemingway house. You have where Robert the Doll lived when the child was alive, and now East Martello Museum. There's what is it? Captain
Tony's.
Captain Tony's, where the hanging tree is, correct? And not too many people know, but if I'm not mistaken on the history, because I had a friend that worked there. His name is Chance Hancock. I don't know if you ever met him, but he worked there as security, and he's also a paranormal investigator, radio talent. And he told me, dude, let me tell you something. There's something weird here. And there's a tombstone on the floor, and it's dedicated to a woman that was wrongfully hanged on that tree and accused of being a witch, correct?
Well, Captain Tony was a storyteller.
Okay.
So what I will tell you, the place is definitely haunted. I've spoken to people who've experienced things. I've experienced things. We used to go by there with one of the tours that I had. I talked to Captain Tony, and he told me the stories about experiencing the lady in blue. Now, where the story, I think it's probably based on some truth. The tree, it's unlikely it was used to hang pirates. That part was probably fabricated. But I do believe that there was somebody hanged there. And the story is that she was having an affair, and the townsfolk pulled her from her bed to hang her from the tree, and that she was wearing a blue nightgown, but her neck didn't snap. Instead, she died from the strangulation with the rope. And they say that her face matched the color of her nightgown.
Wow.
So people have seen her. We've captured images of the lady in blue. But then when you get into those tombstones, there is a small cemetery that Captain Tony uncovered, but I was able to trace the Elvira tombstone, the one that they attribute to her, to a cemetery in New York. That it was
really?
Yeah.
Wow, that's far.
So with Captain Tony's, there's a mixture of legend and truth. And here's one of the cool things about Key West. We're a town that likes to drink, and we like to tell stories. And so through time, these stories, they become more fantastic and more twisted. But when you go back to the truth, a lot of times that truth is stranger than fiction. That's what I like doing. I love digging into the haunted history and finding out what the truth is behind these things.
I've always called Key West the New Orleans of the South, because even though New Orleans is in the South, you can't go any further south than Key West. And I mean, just walking down Duval Street, it feels like you're in New Orleans. It really does. And you're like, wow, this is, because I've been to both New Orleans and Key West, and I was amazed by the way the buildings were built, very much like the French Quarter. And I wonder if there was some influence. Did you ever find any influence from the French Quarter in Key West?
Well, it's interesting. A lot of the seaport towns, I find some of the most haunted towns are the old seaports. So you've got New Orleans, Havana, Key West, St. Augustine, Charleston, Savannah, any of those old towns. And I know a lot of the houses in Key West were built by ships builders. So they used those techniques. And these would have been the same carpenters who built some of the properties in Louisiana. I think, in New Orleans, I think the history goes back even farther. And
Oh yeah.
they've got a lot of the French architecture influences that Key West didn't quite get. We got more of the Bahamian, we got the Cuban, but with those shipbuilders, you can definitely see the similarities, and they use the same techniques to keep the houses cooler or to utilize the breezes. But just saving the history, I think, makes such a big difference too, and you'll find that in a lot of those old port towns.
Oh, I agree. One hotel. I want you to pick one hotel that you would recommend people stay in Key West if they ever decide to go visit that. They will get messed with. They will not get an ounce of sleep because it's so damn haunted.
I think if people want the best haunted experience as far as hotels, you got to stay at the Artist House. I mean, that was the home of Robert the Doll. You can stay in the turret room where Robert the Doll stayed. The room, it used to be Gene Otto's nursery when he was a boy. And then in his last 10 years, up in that turret was where he locked himself away with the doll. So there's so much that goes on there. And listen, people stay there and have varying degrees of experiences. But if you want a haunted hotel that you'll remember and that you can talk about, it's got to be that. Now, if you want to go out and if you want to experience ghosts firsthand, I mean, I highly recommend coming to the fort. USA Today calls it the 10 most haunted destinations in America, and they've done that for the last 4 years. We do the regular ghost tour, and then we do the VIP, which we give people all their own equipment and let them do investigations. People have things happen frequently. A lot of it depends on the energy of the people, but we have stuff happening all the time.
Are you still running your tours there?
Yeah. We do tours there. We do them there, and we do them at the Haunted Firehouse. And so we try to give encounters where we give people the opportunity to be alone at night in these more haunted places.
So what's the name of your tour? And I want our producer to put that down in the ticker below, and where they can actually go to if they want to, make reservations to have a tour done with your tour company.
Yeah, my company is Ghost Key West, and people can go to ghostkeywest.com, and that'll give them the options of the 40 East Martello Ghost Tour with Robert the Doll, VIP, the Haunted Firehouse experience. And we're starting something new where we're doing a UFO Star Watch, where we'll take them out and share the history of UFOs in Key West. And we use this. It's great. It's like a $5,000 military night vision scope, and we use it to look up beyond the stars, and we see some freaky things.
Oh man. I mean, you don't even have to look beyond the stars nowadays. It seems like there's more and more UFO activity ever since the disclosure was disclosed, that hey, yeah, there are aliens. So I already have here someone interested. So Rich, when I come to Florida, can we go to Key West? Yeah, sure, Jenny. Just let me know and we'll make arrangements. And people are going to want to know exactly where they can see Robert the Doll. It's usually at the East Martello Museum, but there are times he's at the Artist House, correct?
They don't move the doll much anymore. He's only traveled 3 times. And once was to see Zach in Las Vegas when he opened his haunted museum. Somebody, the butler who touched him there, had a stroke. He went to a Paracon, a TAPS convention in Tampa back in like 2009, I think. And somebody who went to see him there was struck by lightning.
Geez.
When I was living in Isla Mirada, they brought him up there twice to on Halloween to do a presentation, and the person who brought him up on the way back, she left Robert in her car overnight, and her cat died that night. So anytime he's traveled, it hasn't been great. Now they pretty much keep him protected behind his glass. They have an elaborate alarm system on him too. So taking him out of his case and moving him, it's a big deal.
And meanwhile, Beth Allen is here saying, "Party bus to Florida."
Yeah. I noticed one of the questions that had come up, Alicia had a question, something about asking permission. Alicia, earlier on, I was saying that there's two schools of thought. I don't think asking permission is a good idea from an entity, just because I don't think it's safe. It's kind of putting them above you. And I think it's always best to keep things level so that they don't take advantage of that. So I always just, with Robert the Doll, I preach respect. And I say, don't ask permission, but it's one of those legends that won't die. I mean, they have it written on the wall by Robert saying, don't forget to ask Robert permission to take a photo. But if you think about it, I mean, what's Robert going to do? Say, yes, you can do it. No, you can't do it. That kind of stuff. That kind of stuff just won't happen. But I always preach respect. I think that's.
I don't know if my producer can come up with it real fast because we only got a few minutes left on the show for you. I know you want only an hour, and we're trying to do that for you. I had 2 pictures that I had sent to my producer when I was filming back in I believe 2022. 2021 into 2022. The producer Brian Knappmiller, or director, I should say, same one that directed the Shock Doc, brought out to show us the recreation of Robert the Doll that they used in the Shock Doc. And here it is. I don't know if she can do a close-up, but let me tell you something. Having been around Robert the Doll at least twice that I know of, that was pretty damn good what the Jim Henson Company did when it came to recreating. What was your opinion on that?
Yeah, well, I spend so much time with the real doll that I noticed those differences. It's like when you say, oh, somebody looks like you, and you don't necessarily feel it. But yeah, I mean, they spent a lot of time. Brian's a great guy, and they did a really nice job. And yeah, I mean, for making a puppet, because they had him moving around and things like that. So I think they did a very respectable job. Interesting, which brings me up one other point. When people talk about Robert moving, like in the Shock Doc, they would have him walking around and doing all that. What I've found when people see Robert move, I think it's the entities coming in and out of the doll. You
think so? You know what? That would make sense.
I mean, we've seen the doll physically move. People have seen him breathing. People have seen his foot move. But for the most part, when people have that movement, I think they're seeing the actual entity either moving into it or coming out. And that's why it's so fleeting and so quick, and why more people haven't captured it on video. I guess we should just perceiving that. And I think that is responsible for the majority of the movement with the doll.
I wouldn't wish this on anyone, but I guess we'd have to find someone stupid enough to disrespect Robert and keep the camera focused on Robert when that happens and say, oh, you're screwed. Because I just saw him breathe. I saw him move his arm. He just tried to throw his lion at you. By the way, that's not a dog. It's a lion.
Correct. Leo the lion.
Leo the lion. And a lot of people say, oh, it looks like a, really pissed off Chihuahua. No, it's not. It's a lion. It's just that over the years, it loses fur. It's the skin and everything falls off. It is what it is. For those of you that are interested in getting any and all of Dave's books, and let me tell you something, I love your books. You go so in depth into everything. I liked the book of the rooster. That was hilarious. I loved it. But where could people get your books if they want to online? And hopefully one day, hey, if we're all getting a bus together here, according to the chat, we're all going to pay a visit to Robert the Doll. I hope you're going to be there too.
Oh yeah, that'll be a blast. That'll be an absolute blast.
But where can people get a hold of your books?
People can buy the books on Amazon. So look up David L. Sloan on Amazon. If anybody wants to go to phantompress.com, that'll show pretty much everything I do in Key West, and it will show you all of the book titles. I don't sell them through the site, but that'll give you a good look at everything that I do down there. Something that I think a lot of people here will be interested in. I set up a haunted directory, a free haunted directory for Key West, and that's on hauntedkeywest.com. And that lists like some of the haunted hotels, haunted restaurants, haunted bars, different cemeteries, some of the lesser known cemeteries in hidden places. It's pretty much everything haunted. And it also lists other ghost tours in town, ones that I don't operate, because Robert the Doll is not for everybody. And there's some, I think there's probably 15 or 20 ghost tours in town. Most of them are very good. But this will list some of the other locally owned ones that you'll have a good time with, and help you decide which one's right for you. So everything haunted for Key West, hauntedkeywest.com.
We have Courtney asking, where can you get Robert the Doll whiskey?
Yeah, it was actually the rum, the Robert the Doll rum. And that's through Key West First Legal Rum Distillery. That's my friend Paul Menta in Key West. They were doing online orders for a while. I'm not sure what the status is with that right now. But if you go to, if you look up Key West First Legal Rum, they should have links to that. And then we have an entire Robert the Doll section on Haunted Key West, and that'll tell you about visiting him at the museum, where to find out official merchandise that you can order through the museum online. And they're a great organization. They're a nonprofit dedicated to art and history. But all the good Robert the Doll links are on hauntedkeywest.com.
That's awesome. And let me tell you something real quick before I let you go. I remember the first time I went to Key West Cemetery, and a lot of people don't understand it's above ground cemetery, much like in New Orleans, because of the floods and stuff like that. It was full of roosters. All right, that was years ago. I'm talking 2004, and I went back like 2013. Who invited frickin' Godzilla and his little babies to, look, I can handle roosters. When we get reptilian here, we got problems. At least for me, that's my kryptonite. I started walking, and I swear to you, Dave, it looked like a sea of grass spreading out, and all you saw was this. It was freaking iguanas larger than me, and mind you, I'm 5'10", and I'm like, oh, hell no. I walked out of there. Screw that. No, I don't play those games. What happened? All the roosters are gone. Well, the iguanas eating them?
The iguanas are quite prolific. They probably ate the eggs without doubt. And now the iguanas, they dig down into the graves and they make their nests in some of those graves. And it's crazy when you're walking around there and just seeing them coming up from a grave. It's very, it hits you on a lot of different levels.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'm telling you, you will have an experience one way or the other, some kind, somehow. Key West is the place to go and the place to be. You have everything from Indian Civil War, Robert the Doll. You have Hemingway. You have baby Godzillas in the cemeteries. Yo, I'm telling you, you're going to have fun. Plus, you get a key bonus. My dear friend, David Sloan, thank you so much for being on the show, man. It's been great to have you, and it's been 10 years. That's way too long. We got to chill, you know. One of these days when, things are slowed down for both of us, we got to chillax, hang out, and thank you once again for being on the show.
Absolutely.
I appreciate it.
It's always an honor to spend time with you, Rich. So thank you for making time for me to be on your show.
Beth Allen is saying, I want David part 2.
Yeah, let's do it. Yes, Beth.
We will do it.
Yeah.
Definitely. Thank you, Dave. God bless, and keep in touch, my friend.
Thank you, everybody who tuned in.
That, ladies and gentlemen, he's someone I've known for over a decade now. Great guy, in my opinion. Someone that has done a lot of research when it comes to, Robert the Doll, who's captured the attention of so many people. and for good reason. Something we didn't really touch on, but he was the inspiration behind Chucky the doll. Now, knowing me, if I saw that running at me going, ha, 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 I'm going to punt it. But that's just me. There's other people that possibly run the other way. And I'm telling you, this is one of those stories, I think, prolific. And it's not just because David has written about it. David has literally become Robert the Doll's what's the word I'm looking for? I guess representative. He's the one that's really presented to everyone what Robert the Doll is all about. And I find that to be honorable, something that not too many people are willing to take on. And he's not kidding when he says there are thousands of letters that have been sent to Robert the Doll at East Martello Museum, begging Robert to remove the curse. 5,000, 5 to 10,000, actually. That's a lot. I want you to think about that because, that's way too much. Before I go any further, and this is the start of POD, where I actually start entertaining all questions and comments. And I do have a story that I experienced with Robert the Doll back in 2004 when I was I was locked up with him. But I'd like to address the sponsors before I go any further into POD. So, lovely producer Jen, if you could put that up, I'd appreciate it. We oftentimes get sponsors. We have Trinity Paranormal Investigations of Long Island. We have a paranormal podcast program. We have Paranormally Blonde and Get Haunted. And I can't read that text, okay, because it's really small. Let's see, Cursed. All right, Cursed Cosmetics. Use code Jen for 10% off. Jen Richardson, she's also the producer of the show and my better half. And there it is. You guys can get 10% off. That is the same makeup that is used by, help me out here, Jen. You can pop on now. Come on. I always forget the name of the band, and I love their music, by the way. What is it? Play that funky music, white boy. I forget. I don't know. What's the name of the band that uses their makeup?
Motionless in White.
Thank you. Motionless in White. And also the wrestler.
And if anybody watched the WrestleMania, what was it, this Saturday?
Yeah, this past Saturday and Sunday. Saturday and Sunday.
Yes, Motionless in White was wearing Cursed Cosmetics. And I believe Rhea Ripley was as well, but I'm not exactly for sure.
Oh, she uses their makeup too. Yes. For sure.
Also the band Vampires Everywhere that covered the song, was it Cry Little Sister?
Okay.
There is also a makeup brand, I think it's Lipstick, from them on there as well.
So if you guys need any makeup, and we're talking gothy type makeup, that's the place to go. And these are our sponsors. Yes.
And also, if you're on YouTube, if you are familiar with Joseph Zazula, Bokua Hyde, they released not too long ago the Hide Your Face makeup palette for him as well.
What is the name of this drink, by the way? It's
ass grass.
Okay, it's not ass grass.
Yeah.
Actually tastes pretty good. It's the lavender.
It's a ground up plant made of matcha.
Matcha with oat milk, frap, whatever. It is fantabulous. Thank you for popping that up, Jen.
Flying.
And oh god. So yeah, let's get back to business as usual. Anyone have any questions? And please share in the chat. I'm going to share with you what this guy, right here, all right here, ended up having to go through back in 2004 when I was with Florida Ghost Team. Mind you, I had investigated the paranormal for many, many years, way before I joined the team. But I figured, why not join a team and find out what this is like? So I joined, at that time, South Florida Ghost Team with Sean Jones. We don't know if she's still alive or with us, so may she rest in peace. Great respect for her. We were locked up in there to train a ghost tour team that literally went out. They got dressed period time and everything, but they wanted to be trained on how to use all the gadgetries that we use for scientific methodology during our investigations. And we were literally locked up in East Martello Museum with Robert the Doll. Here's the problem. I have no issue. I got no fear when it comes to Robert the Doll or being locked up in any place. I don't care if it's East Martello Museum, Hell House, or what used to be Bob Mackey's or anything like that. Let me tell you right now. The only issue I took was when one, it always takes just one person of that group that was wanting to be trained to be a paranormal investigator. We had broken off. What we were doing is we were breaking off because there was 4 of us. We were breaking off and we were training in different parts of East Martello Museum. And we come back and this guy, all right, this guy decided he was going to create a sigil around Robert the Doll display glass. You heard me right. Sigil or sigil, I should say, with different, symbols, candles. And we said, what are you doing? And his response was, I'm here to conjure the spirits that reside within Robert the Doll. I was like, you doing what? Excuse me? You have got to be joking. I immediately called lead investigator in, Sean Jones, and I told her as we were walking back, and she's like, oh, hell no. And she got there and she said, all this has got to stop. You need to erase the chalk. You need to take the candles. There's no conjuring of nothing going on here whatsoever. We never gave you permission to do this. Who the hell do you think you are? And he said, this is not my first time doing this. This is actually my 3rd. I was like, what the? Okay. People, let me tell you. Okay. I'm going to get on the soapbox for a little bit here. It's one thing to investigate paranormal phenomenon. It's another thing to also investigate it using scientific methodology. But when you choose to go about it by implementing supernatural means, that's a different matter altogether. This guy didn't know what he was doing. He was actually reading from a book. Now, if you'd done this would have been the 3rd time. You would have been able to have done this by heart. Why did he have to use a book? He didn't know what he was doing. He thought he was just playing along, and this was something that we wanted to see. No, this is not anything that any of us kosher paranormal researchers ever want to see. Listen, I respect all walks of life, faiths, religions. It is what it is. And yes, Courtney, I agree with you there, New York. Oh, hell no. And that's exactly what happened that night. Soon after we made him erase everything, it was too late. Because apparently I had gotten to him after he had already done the conjuring. The problem I had was a lot of crap started happening soon after. He had managed to open something up. Now, I know there's been plenty of people out there arguing left and right. What the hell is a portal? How do we know portals exist? Well, you know what? Call it a portal, call it the veil, call it whatever you like. Spirits are around us at all times. they're sometimes the veil is right there, and sometimes it's past us. And I think it has a lot to do with the full moon, when it comes to atmosphere, when it comes to everything. Everything needs to be, even barometric pressure, which is something that a lot of people don't even think about. They should take under consideration. Barometric pressures could actually play a part in this. Humidity, moon phases, solar flares, the list goes on and on and on. But when you start going in with the intent of using something else to conjure forth something that may more than likely possibly be inhuman, we got some problems. You can't do that. As far as I'm concerned, this individual started quite the storm. I'm not going to say the word. Paranormal activity did pick up. Things started being tipped and knocked down around. I want you to think of a fort. There's a fort, the way it's built is circular. There's a courtyard on the inside, and there's a lot of exhibits throughout this fort. It's huge. It is really big. Plus, it has towers so that they can see any ships coming in off the coast. Things were going bump in the night, and let me tell you, they were falling to the floor. Because I could say, maybe it wasn't him. Maybe this is something that happens on a regular basis. I don't think so. We had been there 2.5 hours long before this moron decided to draw the sigil around Robert the Doll. Strangely enough, after we insisted that he erase it all, that about a half hour later, that's when all hell broke loose. From Beth, I'm not here to make people believers. I know what I know, and I know what I have seen. Preacher sister. Yes, definitely agree with you 100%. Look, I've been in this for far too long now, officially 40 years investigating, paranormal researching, and I can tell you, I've just about witnessed any and all phenomenon, including OBE, personally speaking, that there could possibly be experienced. When you seek to play with anything of the unknown, and this is POD, points of discussion, guys, please chime in, just like Beth did, just like Courtney did a few minutes ago. You need to take under consideration of what you're dealing with. You're dealing with something you cannot see. You better hope and pray you can see, because if the worst way of being attacked is not seeing what's attacking you and not being able to defend yourself against it. When you go with the intent to provoke what may be there, you do realize you are poking a bear with a very sharp stick, and it's going to turn around. It's going to tear you apart. There won't be nothing left of you. My message to many of you, as we come off an incredible interview with Dave Sloan. I call him Dave, I'm sorry. David L. Sloan. I want people to realize something very important. David L. Sloan is just not one of those happy-go-lucky paranormal investigators. He may have started off researching and investigating, and one day when he started writing about Robert the Doll, as he stated in this interview, things got serious. He couldn't even retain the information that he was gathering for the book, and things got dark for not a little bit, for years. And he actually had to leave the paranormal, because sometimes I recommend this to anyone and everyone that's been involved in the paranormal. If you get into it too much and you're doing way too many investigations, you need to take that break. If you don't take that break, I'm sorry to say, you're going to burn out. you will be an easy target for anything that's out there, even if you go and insist, I'm fine. But when you start noticing that your health is going down the drain, don't say that this guy warned you. Courtney says, if you know nothing about it, you should not be playing blind. Your actions have consequences. I agree with you 100%, Courtney. Beth, brother, you are standing on truth tonight. I'm loving every minute of it. And that's what I always stand on. I want people to realize, you know, David Sloan is really, truly one of those individuals that gives out way too much. I've always said this guy will give the shirt off his back to you. He's one of the nicest, down-to-earth individuals. But that's just the way he is. And I think that's why he and I resonate, because we give so much back, not only to the paranormal community, but to whomever. This guy, I mean, he's in the Guinness Book of World Record for the smallest key lime pie to the largest key lime pie ever made. That's pretty good, you know. But just that alone would be awesome to show my kids. I've been mentioned in 2 books, okay? Ghost Hunters of the South and also State by State. Now, it's an honor. I've been immortalized in a book, and I'm one of those big Advent book readers. I love reading books, okay? But I also realize that those people that write those books are really the ones that need to be recognized. Books are going by the wayside nowadays. I remember the last time I heard someone say, oh yeah, I read this book, it was awesome. I was like, really? How long did it take you to read? Well, I think I listened to it for about 2 weeks. I was like, excuse me? And they said, listen to it. I'm like, what do you mean listen to it? Oh, in my car, on my way to work and back. I was like, that's not reading a book. To me, reading a book is actually picking up a book that has pages in it, like, I don't know, pages. I've been taking notes, by the way. That's why I have a pen. I'm old school. I just don't understand people nowadays. I get it. I don't have time to read a book. So you want story time? Okay, get your pillow. Let's do story time. Because that's pretty much what you're doing. You're being lazy. Beth Allen saying, I love books. I love books, the real ones you hold in your hands. Exactly. And so does Courtney as well. Ed, and let me tell you something else. And I'm glad that she's agreeing with me here. Breaks are necessary. Ain't no shame in the game. You got that right. We need to realize that the more we expose ourselves to the unknown, there are people that will have various things going on with them. I'm giving you an example here, and then we're going to be coming to a close on the show. I'm a diabetic. I have high blood pressure, and I have various other health issues going on with me that I need to concern myself with. Does that stop me from being a human being? No, but I do have to take care of myself. I need to be mindful of my health, my physical health. I need to take insulin. I need to take my blood pressure meds. I need to be mindful of me, because what good am I to anybody else, especially my family, if I'm no good, if I'm not available? Okay. The same thing goes for the paranormal. There's so many things that happen when we're dealing with the paranormal on a daily basis that we don't see. We may go to a location and we may be looking for one thing, but for all we know, that one thing is one of 10 things going on in that location that may latch on to you, may affect you physically, emotionally, and most importantly, spiritually. We had Alicia Roussel, and she said, I have lots of books. It's a good disease. I agree. That's one disease I will always get. Wendy Staubner-Lesher. I hope I'm saying your name, and I apologize if I'm not. Please let me know in comments later on if possible. Please don't be mean or anything. I try. I love books, love reading, but I do like an audiobook at times, especially a favorite book. Okay, not to trash the audiobooks, I get it, but I'm old school. I like to feel the pages. I like to turn the page. I like to actually find a special spot where I can read and be undisturbed, okay, by anything, and just be able to have that one-on-one time with that book. Courtney Peterson, Rich is 6 subs away from getting 200 subscribers on YouTube, so go subscribe. Thank you. I appreciate that, Courtney. Yes, if for those of you, and that's the YouTube address that we have. It's look, I'd really appreciate it. You know, we've worked hard to get the numbers up there, but it's hard to come by. Please go to our YouTube. All you really got to do, honestly, is go to YouTube, put Greetings from Beyond Radio, and it'll pop up. Just subscribe and hit like and follow, and that's all it takes. But to end this rant and get off the soapbox, because it's getting really, really uncomfortable. What did she say there? Oh, dang, I missed the doll guy. Yes, you did. But you can watch it again on YouTube. And no, don't worry about that. You're already subscribed, if I recall. Wanted to ask him who stitches the doll up, and do they use holy stitches? I don't think they do, to be honest with you. But it is part of a museum display, so I'm sure they do have curators that do take care of it. But there's been a lot of demand to have David Sloan back onto the show, so there will be a part 2, and hopefully you'll chime in then and you'll be able to ask your question. In closing, let me just state this. This show was dedicated to a dear friend of mine that passed away a few days ago, Paul Eno. For those of you that don't know Paul Eno, I've known Paul Eno for 15 years. And he was someone that was studying in the priesthood, that was training to be a priest, and working with the famous Ed and Lorraine Warren. Yes, the actual Ed and Lorraine Warrens, back in the day in the 70s. And there's a picture somewhere in there. If Jen could put that up, I'd appreciate it, where it shows a very young Paul Eno with Ed and Lorraine Warren back in the 70s. There he is to the right, Paul Eno, Ed and Lorraine Warren next to him. It was, when I heard the news, I was in shock, because I've known this gentleman for many, many years. Great guy. John Zaffis remembers him from back in the day, and it was quite the shock. I spoke to John yesterday, in fact, to bring this to his attention. And he says, "Oh yeah, I already knew, buddy. I had Ben, his son, call me up and let me know." And the boss and I call him the boss. I know you guys call him the Godfather. We had a chance to catch up, but this show tonight is dedicated to Paul Eno and his memory and his legacy. This man was a groundbreaker in the paranormal field. If you have not yet checked out his books, go on Amazon, check them out. Put in Paul Eno. Anything that this man has written, please buy. You will, let me tell you, he's truthful. He's to the T. You will enjoy the book. I know I have 3 that are autographed by him, and I loved those books. So thank you very much, everyone, for devoting your time to this show. I appreciate it. In closing, I'm going to say what I always say: live life. Don't let life live you. And peace be still. Good night.